There's a particular kind of loneliness that no one talks about. It happens in crowded rooms. It whispers when you're busy. It's the feeling that you're here, but not quite present, and it's trying to tell you something. You wake up. You go through the motions. Coffee, emails, conversations that feel like performances. And somewhere beneath it all, there's this quiet hum of disconnection. Not depression, exactly. Not anxiety, though it wears that face sometimes. It's subtler than that. It's the sense that you're walking through your own life as a visitor. You look in the mirror and recognize the face, but somewhere along the way, you stopped recognizing the person behind the eyes. The one who used to have dreams that felt vivid. The one who could sit in silence without immediately reaching for distraction. When did that change? Most people never ask this question. They feel it, of course, in the space between sleep and waking. In those Sunday evenings, when the week looms ahead like an obligation rather than an opportunity. In the strange emptiness that follows getting exactly what they thought they wanted. But they don't ask why. Instead, they do what you've probably done. They add more goals, more productivity, more self-improvement, more noise to drown out that quiet voice that keeps asking, is this it? Is this what I've been moving toward? The Sufis have a teaching about a seeker who spent years searching for enlightenment in distant lands, studying with masters, climbing mountains, fasting in caves. When he finally returned home, exhausted and no closer to what he sought, he found it waiting in his own garden. It had been there all along, but here's what that story doesn't tell you. The garden looked exactly the same as when he left. Nothing about the external world had changed. What changed was his ability to see it. You feel lost not because you've strayed from some predetermined path. You feel lost because you've become estranged from the part of you that knows how to find meaning in the ordinary. The part that doesn't need extraordinary circumstances to feel alive. Think about the last time you felt truly present. Not distracted by what comes next or what came before. Just here, fully inhabiting this moment, this body, this breath. For most people, that memory lives somewhere in childhood, running through sprinklers, building forts, getting lost in books. Those weren't happier times because life was easier. They were fuller because you hadn't yet learned to split your attention between 1,000 different versions of yourself. The child you didn't worry about optimizing their life. They didn't perform happiness for an invisible audience. They didn't measure their worth against metrics that would shift the moment they achieved them. They simply were. And somewhere between then and now, you learn to abandon that state of being. Not because you chose to, but because the world taught you that being isn't enough. You must always be becoming, always reaching, always improving. Always one step ahead of who you are right now. This is the trap. The quiet reason you feel lost isn't that you don't know where you're going. It's that you've forgotten how to arrive. You've trained yourself to live perpetually in the future or the past, never fully landing in the present moment. And the present moment is the only place where you actually exist. Alan Watts once said that trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The you that observes cannot be the same as the you being observed. And yet we spend our lives trying to pin ourselves down, to create a stable identity we can point to and say, this is me. But you are not a fixed thing. You're a process, a verb disguised as a noun. And the moment you try to capture yourself in definition, you create distance between who you are and who you think you should be. That distance is the feeling of being lost. You're not actually lost. You're right here. But you've convinced yourself that here isn't where you're supposed to be. That there's some other version of your life, some other version of yourself, waiting just around the corner, if you could only figure out the right combination of habits, achievements, and transformations. So you keep moving, keep searching, keep adding more layers between yourself and the simple fact of your existence. And the voice gets quieter. That voice that once knew how to play, how to rest, how to be enough without earning it. It's still there, beneath the noise. But you've learned not to trust it, because it doesn't sound like ambition. It doesn't push you toward more. It whispers something far more radical. You're already whole. This isn't the message the world wants you to hear. Whole people don't make good consumers. They don't stay perpetually hungry for the next thing that promises to complete them. They don't build their lives around filling a void that was created by the very system that now sells them the tools to fill it. So that voice gets buried, and in its place rises this constant, gnawing sense that something is missing, that you're not quite where you're supposed to be, that everyone else has figured out something you haven't. But what if the thing that's missing isn't something you need to find? What if it's something you need to stop looking for? There's a Zen story about a student who asks the master, "What is the way?" The master replies, "Your ordinary mind is the way." The student, confused, asks, "How do I return to it?" The master answers, "By trying to return to it, you turn away from it." This is the paradox at the heart of feeling lost. The very act of seeking yourself creates the distance that makes you feel separate from yourself. Every strategy you employ to find yourself reinforces the belief that you are lost. Every technique for achieving presence confirms that you are absent. You cannot think your way into being. You cannot strategize your way into wholeness. You cannot achieve your way into peace. And yet, this is exactly what we've been taught to do. We treat consciousness like a project. Meditation becomes another task on the to-do list. Mindfulness becomes a performance. Even our attempts at presence are future-oriented. I'm doing this now so that I can be more present later. But presence isn't a destination. It's what remains when you stop trying to get somewhere. Think about it this way: when you feel lost, what you're really experiencing is the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. That gap exists only in thought, only in the mental story about who you are and what your life is supposed to look like. Right now, in this moment, without reference to that story, are you lost? Or are you simply here, reading these words, breathing, existing in space and time? The lostness isn't in the moment itself. It's in the comparison, the measurement, the constant evaluation of your life against some invisible standard that shifts every time you get close to meeting it. This is what the ego does. It creates problems so it can solve them. It generates dissatisfaction so it can promise satisfaction. It convinces you that you're incomplete so it can sell you the illusion of completion. And the quiet reason you feel lost is that you've mistaken the ego's voice for your own. that voice that tells you you're not enough, that's not your deepest truth speaking. That's the conditioned mind, repeating patterns it learned from a culture that profits from your sense of inadequacy. That voice that says you need to be more, do more, achieve more before you can rest, that's not wisdom. That's the internalized pressure of a system that values productivity over presence. That voice that insists there's a better version of your life just out of reach. That's not intuition. That's the fear of missing out dressed up as ambition. Your actual self, the consciousness beneath all those voices, doesn't feel lost. It can't. Because it isn't trying to get anywhere. It's already the space in which everything appears and disappears. The awareness that remains constant while thoughts, feelings, and experiences come and go. You are not the storm. You are the sky through which it passes. But we forget this. We identify with the weather instead of the space that holds it. We think we are our thoughts, our feelings, our circumstances. And when those things are turbulent, we conclude that we are lost. The Sufis have a teaching about this. They say the soul is like a bird that has forgotten it can fly. It walks along the ground, struggling through obstacles, exhausted by the effort of moving forward. And all the while, it possesses wings. It's always possessed wings. It simply forgot to use them. The forgetting is the problem. Not some external lack, not some deficiency in who you are, just forgetting. And what have you forgotten? That you are not the thinker of your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thinking happens. That you are not the story of your past or the anxiety about your future. You are the present moment experiencing itself. That you are not the role you play, the identity you've constructed, the image you maintain. You are the consciousness that witnesses all of these things without being defined by any of them. This isn't mystical abstraction. This is direct experience. Right now, as you read these words, there is awareness happening. Thoughts are appearing. Feelings are arising. And something in you is aware of all of it without being diminished or changed by any of it. That awareness is what you actually are. And it's never been lost. What's lost is your identification with that awareness. You've become so absorbed in the content of consciousness, the thoughts, the feelings, the stories, that you've forgotten the context, the space in which everything appears. Imagine you're watching a movie. If you're completely absorbed, you might feel fear during a scary scene or sadness during a tragic moment. But if you remember you're sitting in a theater, watching images on a screen, the emotions don't disappear. But they don't overwhelm you either. You remember the larger context. Your life is like that movie. The thoughts and feelings are real. The experiences matter. But they're not the totality of who you are. They're appearances within something larger, within awareness itself. When you forget this, every uncomfortable feeling becomes a problem to solve. Every difficult thought becomes evidence that something is wrong with you. Every moment of emptiness becomes proof that you're lost. But when you remember, even for just a moment, that you are the space in which all of this appears, everything shifts. The discomfort doesn't have to disappear for you to be okay. The thoughts don't have to stop for you to find peace. The circumstances don't have to change for you to feel whole. Because wholeness isn't a state you achieve. It's what you are when you stop fragmenting yourself into past and future, should and shouldn't, enough and not enough. It's what remains when the seeking stops. So how do you return to this? How do you remember what you've forgotten? Not through effort, not through addition, through subtraction, through releasing what was never yours to begin with. Let me offer you something simple, not a technique to master, not a practice to perfect, just a gentle shift in attention that you can come back to whenever you notice you've drifted away from yourself. It starts with noticing. Right now, notice what it feels like to be in your body, not the idea of your body, not the judgment about your body, the actual sensation of inhabiting space, the weight of your body against whatever is supporting it, the rhythm of your breath moving in and out without effort, the subtle sensations that arise and dissolve moment to moment. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to fix anything. Just notice. This is the first return. From the abstract to the concrete, from the mental to the physical, from the story about your life to the direct experience of being alive. Most of your feeling of being lost lives in the story, in the narrative about who you should be by now, what you should have accomplished, where you should be in your journey. But that story exists only in thought, only in memory and imagination. It has no substance in this moment. In this moment there is just this, just breath, just sensation, just awareness. And in just this, you are not lost. The second return is from doing to being. We're trained to believe that every moment should be productive. That rest must be earned. That simply existing without purpose or direction is a waste. But this belief is what fragments you. It turns you into a means to an end, a tool for some future outcome. But you are not a tool. You are an end in yourself. Your value doesn't come from what you produce or achieve. It comes from the simple fact that you exist. That consciousness has taken this particular form in this particular moment as you. Practice moments of purposeless being. Not meditation with a goal, not relaxation to improve performance. Just being for its own sake, sitting without doing anything, walking without going anywhere, breathing without trying to get somewhere through the breath. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. The mind will immediately present tasks that need doing, problems that need solving, ways you should be improving yourself. Let those thoughts arise. Notice them, but don't follow them. Come back to just being. This isn't wasting time. This is remembering what time is for. Not just for accomplishing and acquiring, but for experiencing. For inhabiting your life rather than rushing through it towards some imagined finish line. The third return is from comparison to presence. Every time you measure yourself against others, you create separation. You fragment yourself into the person you are and the person you think you should be. And in that gap, the feeling of being lost takes root. But comparison happens in thought. It requires you to leave the present moment and construct mental models of yourself and others, then evaluate those models against arbitrary standards. What would happen if you stopped doing that, even for an hour, even for a moment? Without comparison, who are you? Without the story of being ahead or behind, successful or failing, enough or not enough. Without the constant evaluation, you are simply this awareness, this presence, this experience unfolding moment to moment. And in this, there is no lost. There is only here. The fourth return is from seeking to seeing, We spend so much energy looking for meaning, looking for purpose, looking for the answer that will make everything make sense. But what if meaning isn't something you find? What if it's something you create through the quality of your attention? Meaning doesn't exist in objects or achievements or destinations. It emerges in the space between you and your experience when you're fully present with what is. A conversation becomes meaningful not because of what's discussed, but because you were actually there for it. A meal becomes meaningful not because of what you ate, but because you tasted it. A moment becomes meaningful not because it's extraordinary, but because you didn't miss it. This is the radical shift from seeking meaning in circumstances to creating meaning through presence. You don't need a better life to feel fulfilled. You need to more fully inhabit the life you have. Every moment, you're waiting for the right circumstances to begin living, is a moment you reinforce the pattern of absence, of not being here because you're convinced that there is where you need to be. But there is just another here, another moment requiring the same presence you're withholding from this one. Start now, not when things get better, not when you figure everything out, not when you achieve the goal or fix the problem or become the person you think you need to be. Now, take one conscious breath, not to relax, not to achieve anything, just to experience the reality of breathing, the miracle of air entering your body without effort, sustaining you without earning it. This is the practice. This is the return. Again and again, from the story to the moment, from the future to now, from the idea of yourself to the direct experience of being. You will forget. You will drift back into seeking, comparing, measuring, striving. This is natural. The mind does what it's been trained to do. But each time you notice you can choose differently, you can return. Not to some idealized state of permanent peace, but to the simple reality of this breath, this moment, this inexplicable fact of being alive. And slowly, so slowly you might not notice at first, the feeling of being lost begins to dissolve. Not because you found yourself, but because you stopped being convinced you were missing. There's something I need to tell you about this journey you think you're on. You're not on a journey. You've never been on a journey. That's the illusion that keeps you perpetually in motion, always seeking, never arriving. The spiritual path, the personal growth, the quest for meaning, these are all just elaborate ways of avoiding the simple truth. You're already here. You've always been here. There's nowhere else to be. The quiet reason you feel lost is that you've been taught to believe in a destination, some future moment when everything will finally make sense, when you'll finally feel complete, when you'll finally be enough. But that moment doesn't exist in the future. It only exists now, and now, and now again. This isn't pessimism. It's the most liberating truth you could discover. Because if wholeness only exists in some imagined future, you'll spend your entire life chasing it. But if wholeness is what you are right now, beneath all the stories of inadequacy, then you can stop running. You can finally rest. Not the rest of exhaustion, but the rest of recognition. The deep exhale of realizing you don't have to earn your place in existence. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to become someone else before you're allowed to be at peace. You are the person you've been searching for, not the perfected version, not the healed version. not the enlightened version. You, right here, with all your confusion and contradiction, with all your uncertainty and fear, with all your humanness intact. The consciousness that reads these words is the same consciousness that exists in every awakened being who ever lived. It's not more evolved in them. It's not pure or better. It's the same awareness simply recognized. And you can recognize it too, not through years of practice, not through accumulating knowledge. Right now, in the space between these words, in the silence before the next thought, in the awareness that notices the mind's constant movement without being caught in it. That's the doorway, not to somewhere else, but to here, fully, finally, without resistance. The Sufis say that God is closer to you than your jugular vein, that intimate, that immediate, not distant and requiring pilgrimage, not hidden and requiring discovery. But here, always here, closer than breath. This is true whether you believe in God or not. Because what they're pointing to isn't a religious concept. It's the undeniable intimacy of existence itself. The fact that you are awareness aware of itself, consciousness experiencing consciousness. And in that recognition, the question of being lost becomes absurd. Because to be lost, you'd have to be separate from where you belong. But you are where you belong. You couldn't be anywhere else. Even your feeling of being lost is happening exactly where it should be, here, in this moment, in awareness. The difference between feeling lost and feeling found isn't a change in circumstances. It's a change in perspective. From identifying with the content of consciousness to recognizing yourself as consciousness itself. And that recognition doesn't require you to transcend your humanity. You don't have to rise above your emotions or eliminate your thoughts or escape your body. You just have to see that you are the space in which all of that appears. The awareness that remains untouched while everything else changes. This is what the great teachers mean when they talk about awakening. Not becoming special, not achieving some superhuman state, just seeing clearly what's always been true. You are not the wave, you are the ocean. And the wave is how the ocean experiences itself. So here's what I'm offering you permission to arrive, right now, in this moment, without changing anything, without fixing anything, without becoming anything other than what you already are. Permission to stop seeking and start seeing. To stop becoming and start being. To stop performing and start inhabiting. The next time you feel that quiet ache of disconnection, that sense of being lost, don't immediately try to fix it. Don't add another strategy or technique or practice. Just pause. Take one conscious breath, and notice that the one noticing the feeling is not lost, cannot be lost, is awareness itself, watching the experience of feeling lost arise and dissolve like everything else. You are not your feelings. You are not your thoughts. You are not your circumstances. You are the vast, spacious awareness in which all of those things appear. And that awareness is home, has always been home, will always be home. This is the quiet reason you feel lost. You've been looking for yourself in all the places you're not, in achievements, in relationships, in accomplishments, in the future, in some better version of who you are. But you've always been right here, beneath the seeking, beneath the striving, beneath the story of not being enough whole, complete, already arrived. The journey is over. It never really began. There's only this eternal moment of being, experiencing itself in infinite forms, forgetting and remembering, losing and finding, always returning to the simple truth. You are not lost. You never were. You just forgot for a while that there's nowhere to go. Welcome home. You've been here all along.